The Dictator's Blood Trail: How Saddam Hussein's Crimes Shocked the World. A man in a dark cell, his face lit only by a dim bulb swinging overhead. Guards whisper nervously outside the door. The world is watching. In a few hours, this man, once one of the most feared dictators alive, will face justice. But before the rope tightens around his neck, let's rewind. Who was Saddam Hussein? And how did he leave behind a trail of blood that terrified not only Iraq, but the entire world? Saddam Hussein was not born a king, but he always wanted to rule like one. He grew up in poverty, in a dusty village near Tikrit, Iraq. His father disappeared before he was even born. His mother, overwhelmed with grief, nearly abandoned him. Saddam grew up with anger in his chest and revenge in his mind. As a teenager, he was already drawn to violence. He carried a gun when others carried school books. He believed power came from fear, not kindness. By the time he joined the Ba'ath Party, a political group that wanted to rule Iraq with strict control, Saddam had learned how to kill without hesitation. His first major act? An attempted assassination of Iraq's prime minister in 1959. The plan failed, bullets flew, and Saddam fled across the border into exile. But he didn't give up. He sharpened his mind, built connections, and promised himself one thing. One day, he would return, and Iraq would belong to him. In the 1960s, Iraq was full of chaos. Coups, assassinations, and betrayals were everyday news. Saddam thrived in that chaos. He returned from exile, crawling his way up the ladder of power. Unlike other politicians, Saddam didn't just debate. He threatened. He spied on enemies. He tortured rivals. By the 1970s, Saddam became Iraq's strongman. He was not yet president, but he controlled everything from the shadows. If someone spoke against him, they vanished. If someone whispered about him, they disappeared. Fear was his weapon. When he finally took full control in 1979, he didn't hold a normal ceremony. Instead, he staged a chilling spectacle. Saddam called hundreds of officials into a grand hall. With cameras rolling, he read out a list of names, accusing them of treason. One by one, men were dragged out, crying, begging, pleading. Some were executed that same night. Others were tortured until they confessed. Everyone left in that hall understood. Saddam was untouchable. He unleashed secret police to crush anyone who opposed him. Families vanished overnight. Children grew up without fathers because their parents had whispered the wrong words. He built palaces while his people starved. He bought golden weapons, rare cars, and even had a Quran written in his own blood, an act that shocked the Islamic world. But the world truly saw Saddam's brutality in 1980, when he launched a war against neighboring Iran. It was supposed to be quick. Instead, it dragged on for 8 years. Millions died. And Saddam used chemical weapons, poison gas, on both soldiers and civilians. Villages were wiped out in minutes. The air turned deadly, and bodies collapsed where they stood. The most infamous attack came in 1988, in the Kurdish town of Halabja. Saddam's planes dropped bombs filled with mustard gas and nerve agents. Thousands of innocent men, women, and children suffocated in their own streets. Pictures of tiny bodies lying in rows shocked the world. For many, this was the moment Saddam Hussein's name became equal to terror. But Saddam was not finished. Even as the world condemned him, he felt untouchable. He thought he could play with superpowers like the US and get away with it. He thought oil money could protect him. But soon, his decisions would drag the world into one of the most shocking wars of the modern age. The 1980s ended with Iraq drowning in blood and debt. The war with Iran had drained Saddam Hussein's resources. His soldiers were exhausted. His economy was broken. Billions of dollars had been wasted on a conflict that solved nothing. But Saddam wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted to be seen not just as Iraq's leader, but as the Middle East's strongest man. And in his mind, there was only one way to rebuild Iraq's fortune: seize it. The temptation of Kuwait. Kuwait was a tiny but wealthy neighbor to Iraq. Its oil wells pumped rivers of black gold. And to Saddam, Kuwait was weak, too weak to resist him. He accused them of stealing oil by drilling too close to Iraq's border. He also demanded that Kuwait forgive Iraq's massive war debt. When Kuwait refused, Saddam's anger boiled over. On August 2, 1990, Saddam made his move. Before dawn, Iraqi tanks rolled across the desert and stormed Kuwait. Soldiers smashed through defenses in hours. By the next morning, the entire nation was under Saddam's control. The world was stunned. He appeared on television, declaring Kuwait as Iraq's 19th province. But behind the scenes, his troops committed horrors. Thousands of Kuwaitis were killed, tortured, or disappeared. Families fled in terror. Streets once full of life were turned into ghost towns. The world reacts. Saddam thought the world would do nothing. After all, he had gotten away with massacres in the past. But this time, he underestimated his enemies. The United Nations condemned the invasion. Countries across the globe joined together, demanding Saddam withdraw. But he refused. Then, U.S. President George H.W. Bush made a fateful decision. Saddam would not be allowed to keep Kuwait. An international coalition was formed, over 30 nations joining forces, the largest military alliance since World War II. Operation Desert Shield began. Hundreds of thousands of American, British, and Allied troops poured into Saudi Arabia, preparing for war. The Middle East braced itself. Saddam's gamble. Saddam was defiant. He believed his army, the fourth largest in the world at the time, could withstand anything. He even tried to rally Arab nations by calling it a holy war against the West. But his true strategy was far darker. If war came, he would burn Kuwait's oil fields, launch missiles at Israel, and use chemical weapons again. He wanted chaos. He wanted to drag the world down with him. January 17, 1991. Midnight. The skies above Baghdad roared with thunder, not from nature, but from U.S. jets streaking across the night. Bomb after bomb rained down on Iraq. Radar sites, power grids, bridges, and military bases were destroyed within hours. It was the beginning of Operation Desert Storm, a war unlike anything the world had seen. Satellite-guided missiles, stealth bombers invisible to radar, laser-targeted strikes. Iraq's defenses crumbled almost instantly. The world watched in awe on live television as the skies lit up with fire. For the first time, war looked like a video game. Night vision cameras capturing missiles slamming into targets with deadly precision. Saddam's propaganda machine claimed victory, but the truth was clear. Iraq was being shattered from above. The ground war. After weeks of relentless bombing, the coalition launched its ground assault. On February 24, 1991, tanks and troops rolled into Kuwait. In just 100 hours, barely 4 days, the Iraqi army collapsed. Soldiers surrendered in droves, starving, broken, and terrified. But as Saddam's troops retreated, they carried out his cruelest order. They set fire to Kuwait's oil wells. Over 600 wells exploded into flames. For months, the skies were black with smoke. The sun was hidden. The ground was poisoned. It was one of the greatest environmental disasters in history. Even worse, Saddam launched missiles at Israel, hoping to provoke a wider war. Families in Tel Aviv huddled in gas masks, terrified that chemical warheads would strike. The world held its breath. But Israel, under pressure from the U.S., did not retaliate. Saddam's plan failed. The Highway of Death, the most haunting image of the Gulf War, came during Iraq's retreat. On Highway 80, the road between Kuwait and Basra, Iraqi forces tried to flee. but U.S. planes struck relentlessly. Tanks, trucks, and cars were turned into twisted metal. Bodies lay scattered among the wreckage. The road became known as the Highway of Death. It was a message to the world. Saddam's army was finished. Saddam survives. By late February 1991, the war was over. Kuwait was free. The coalition had won. But there was one shocking twist. Saddam Hussein was still alive. Despite his crimes, despite his defeat, the U.S. and its allies stopped short of toppling him. They pushed Iraq's forces out of Kuwait, but left Saddam in power. Why? Because they feared that removing him would plunge Iraq into chaos, so Saddam returned to Baghdad, bloodied but unbroken. And almost immediately, he turned his fury inward. The rebellions. After the war, Iraqis rose up. Shia Muslims in the south and Kurds in the north believed Saddam was finished. They thought the U.S. would support them. Armed uprisings spread across the country. But Saddam responded with savage violence. His tanks crushed towns. His soldiers executed thousands. Mass graves filled the deserts. Once again, the world watched in horror as Saddam proved he was willing to kill his own people to stay in power. The U.S. declared no-fly zones over parts of Iraq to protect civilians, but it was too late. Saddam had survived, and his blood trail grew longer. The Gulf War was supposed to end Saddam Hussein's reign. Instead, it became just a note, her chapter in his brutal story. He had lost a battle, but not the throne. The world had underestimated his grip on power. But soon, another event, one of the darkest in American history, would drag Saddam back into the crosshairs. And this time, the world would not stop until he was gone.